Hi, I'm Leah Brick, Executive Director for SASH. Welcome to Conversations from the Couch. Once again, we're here with Andrew Susskind, who presented last year at our annual conference and is getting ready to do a webinar for us. Andrew, tell us about your webinar that's coming up and give us the title.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to Conversations on the Couch. I love to talk with you. And the upcoming webinar is called The Opposite of Sexual Compulsivity is Connection. And I don't know if you're familiar, Leah, with the quote from Johann Hari, who did a TED Talk a few years ago, but he said that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. So the name of this webinar is actually a variation on the quote. And when I heard the quote, I was very much in sync with what he was saying, because it's actually what I've seen both in my therapy practice and in the 12-step rooms for many, many years, that connection is ultimately the healer. Connection is really what binds the recovery together and glues the forward momentum and deeper healing. And so that's really where this particular workshop was inspired.
It sounds almost like what you're saying is that connection is what drives our sobriety. It's really what makes that sobriety happen.
Absolutely. And what I like to think about is like a triad of connection. So it's connection to self, it's connection to others, and it's connection to a power greater than oneself, if you have a spiritual connection as part of your healing. And when I say connection to self, I really am talking to our internal world, right? So it's not just connecting to something surfacey. It's really being able to know what are we thinking, feeling, sensing, what's really going on inside of us, and being grounded in that. So that's can be thought of as a nervous system thing to some extent. Also, connection to others is not just playing sports with others or going for a walk with others, but it's actually about consciously connecting with emotionally reliable people in our lives and having some kind of deeper contact. So having real conversations, being super honest and transparent with those who we care for and care for us. And lastly, a connection to a power greater than ourselves is, of course, borrowed from the 12-step tradition. And that can mean lots of things to lots of people, but a power greater than ourselves is really something that is beyond us. So instead of feeling like we have to do it all by ourselves, is there a God? Is there a pet? Is there nature? Is there something outside of ourselves that can also be really nourishing for us?
I really appreciate you talking about the connection to self, because I think that's one of the, especially when you move into recovery, it's one of the hardest things to really embrace. I'm not lovable. All of these things that I did, how will anyone ever want to have a relationship with me? So I can't connect with others, but I'm not also connecting with myself because I'm embarrassed, I'm humiliated, I have so much shame around the things that I do. And changing that paradigm, really changing it and understanding that I can't develop a relationship with somebody else until I've developed that relationship with myself. And that includes changing the way I talk to myself. Maybe I'm changing the way I talk to other people, but I'm still ridiculing myself.
It's interesting you mentioned that the recent podcast I did was called Taming the Inner Critic. And really it's talking about self-compassion ultimately. But I agree, Leah, to really be comfortable in our own skin, to really listen to our own heart, to really be able to regulate our nervous system. I mean, all of those things are what we're talking about. It's really being able to be fully ourselves and to be at peace with that.
Sure. And patience, I think, I learn to be patient with other people, but I'm not always patient with myself. So I think that's a key component of it as well. What do you hope that the participants are going to take away? What's the nugget that you want them to get?
I hope two things. So I'm going to be focusing on regulating the nervous system because I come from a somatic training and a somatic lens. So regulating the nervous system is one of the focal points of the talk. And then what my version of emotional sobriety, a lot of people talk about emotional sobriety in different ways. I talk about it in terms of regulation, emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, and attachment. And so, if there's two takeaways, it's hopefully to have a little bit more understanding of how regulating the nervous system contributes to our recovery, and also how emotional sobriety or emotional regulation and attachment contributes to sustainable sobriety.
You know, we're talking about sobriety, but we are the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health. And so let's talk for a few minutes about why this particular topic, connection specifically, is important to sexual health.
Sure. So I love the fact that the Society for the Advancement of Sexual Health has been placing even more emphasis recently on sexual health, because sexual health is so much about looking at what do we really want and desire? What is it that really matters to us in terms of our outlook as sexual beings? And one of the things that I didn't say before is that part of connection to self and part of our connection to our internal world is really understanding our erotic templates, really being able to explore and investigate what is it that really turns us on, what is it that gives us pleasure. And I, in the last few years, have been steering much more in that direction because I come from a more traditional sex addiction background, but I don't actually use the term sexual addiction as much anymore. That's why I call this particular webinar the opposite of sexual compulsivity, because I think compulsive sexual behavior to me is a better description. But what I wanted to come back to for a second is the idea that ultimately, for myself, for my clients, for those in 12-step, I think it's about curiosity. I think it's ultimately about being non-judgmental and less dogmatic and more open-hearted to what it is that can be safe sexually, that can be fun sexually, and that ultimately can be liberating. And I know that's my personal effort and outlook. And I'm excited about the way the field is moving, because I spend more time nowadays with sexual health educators than ever before. And it's actually not only inspiring, but it's adding a whole new language and direction to what sustainable sexual recovery can really look like.
I really can relate to what you're saying, Andrew, and it is so important to really open our just to open our eyes, open our ideas to new things, and to say, what is this going to be for me? What is sexual health going to be for me now? What is it for me in my sobriety? What is it for me in my life? And how do I relate that to my partner relationships? To what about teaching my children? And just really becoming educated myself about it, but also to really to have new ideas and experiences that maybe were outside of my realm before, and know that that doesn't make me weird or different. It just means I'm exploring and open.
Right, right. So we can teach an old dog new tricks. Speaking for myself, anyway.
Well, tell us about where we can find you next and what's exciting happening in your practice. What should we know about what's going on with your clinical world?
Sure, I'm happy to share about that. So just on a personal note, I've been working from home on Zoom for a little more than a year now, and I've been busier than ever. I'm really grateful for that. And as you know, Leah, 2 years ago, my book was released. So I'll take the moment to show the book. It's called "It's Not About the Sex: Moving from Isolation to Intimacy After Sexual Addiction." And what I'm really excited about is I'm starting to develop, at least in my head at this point, a workbook to follow up with the book. I've learned so much in the last few years from the readers and from the people who have shared with me what they've liked and what they want more of, and I'm generating energy and focus on how that may come together. So you can stay tuned for that. Also, I have a couple upcoming engagements at the end of May 22nd. I'm speaking for the Sexual Compulsives Anonymous Los Angeles Fellowship, which is my home fellowship, actually. And I'm doing a 3-part series that is actually what the book is based on, which is the first workshop is going to be on the past, the second workshop is going to be on the present, and the third workshop is going to be on the future. And so this one is called Learning from the Past. And then in June, for the California Society of Clinical Social Work, on June 12th, I'm doing a presentation on the opposite of addiction is connection. So that's a little broader beyond sexual compulsivity. And then in July, I'm pleased to be presenting at the International Brain Spotting Conference, which is physically in Denver. I'm going to be doing it from home, although it's going to be a hybrid conference, which I guess is the kind of the future right now. And that's on brain spotting, trauma, and addiction. So I'm just really pleased with how things are evolving, and it's been such a pleasure to be reacquainted with SASH. I was a member a long time ago, and then I wasn't a member, and now I'm back. And I've enjoyed getting to know you, Leah, and getting to know the organization again.
Well, thank you. We're really thrilled to have you with us, Andrew, and certainly to know what you're doing. Where can people find you? So you're in California, and if
Right.
somebody is looking for services, they can find you obviously through telehealth for local people, right?
Right.
And what about your website? What's your website?
Sure. Well, just so you know, and I think a lot of states work this way, anybody in the state of California can call me and reach out for my services. So it's a big state. We could be our own country here. And I'm located physically in Los Angeles. And my website is www.westsidetherapist.com. And that's all one word, singular, Westside Therapist. And you can find everything right there. So if you're interested in checking out my podcasts or my blog or my just information about my practice in general, how to reach me to order a book, it's really all right there on Westside Therapist.
That's great. And you're right. That's one of the benefits right now, isn't it? And I think going forward, it will be one of the major changes in our lives, that we can do so much online, and it really allows us to reach the people that we weren't reaching before. So services are available when they were previously prohibitive. So that's exciting.
It is. I have to say I have a preference to in-person work, and I'm looking forward to that happening again. But you're right, telehealth has been a pleasant surprise. And I also want to mention that if anybody is looking for resources in Los Angeles, if I'm unable to accommodate you for whatever reason, please use me as a resource, and I can assist you in finding the kind of support that you're looking for.
Fantastic. Well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today for Conversations from the Couch. Just as a reminder to everyone, Andrew's workshop is coming up on April 22nd. We've set it for an evening time, so that'll make it easier for people to go, not miss clients, and hopefully attend. We look forward to spending more time with you, Andrew, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Leah. It's a pleasure being here.